Kusum. She had been walking in front of me for a while, and I had slowly fallen into the pace and into the rhythm of her footsteps, and I had seen this truck coming towards us as the pinpoint head on a whirling funnel of sand and dust, but quite there in the distance. And she was like a figure in a cloudscape, bound for the whirlwind. And all I could see was her backside in rags, and the lotus prints of her feet on the dry riverbed sands, and the tray on her head, and the glasswork on it. And the pinpoint truck getting closer, unpinning, unpointing, still silent, but dragging a 10-headed Ravana monster of turbulence and invisibility in its wake. But she was an Apsara, a nymph of spheres, unborn and unbegotten. She was beyond intrusion, beyond harm. She would be safe. I don't know if I should be telling you this, because conversations between mere mortals and other beings are supposed to be potent spells that keep their tantric magic for just as long as they remain within the realm of well-kept secrets. But here we go. In my walking days, I actually did tend to pray quite a bit, as at that time I was contemplating on some utterly complicated stuff with regard to soul, or is there no soul, Atman, Anatman, while I gently negotiated my way down from the foothills through the basin of the river Ganga toward Patna, and yonder to Bodh Gaya, and hence to Kashi, where the wheel of the Dhamma was brought into motion, and I longed to be riding in its tailwind. But all this was really quite of a walk, but don't go too whoa on this or something, because I trod with time and a stack of slowing, albeit sometimes enlightening thoughts in my head. So, Ram, 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 I said. Ram, let her be safe. But my prayer got unheard. She was walking in front of me, and I had gradually descended into her pace and into the teen-tal rhythm of her body, when the silence of the setting sun burst out in bleeding as it got struck in the back by the roar of that engine. And now the truck got really close, and I was about 300 feet behind, trying to unite with her footsteps. But now I could feel this Ashok Leyland thunder and blast. And I remember very well that in a flash, I wondered why, for goodness sake, why did the driver not even blink? And why the girl kept walking and walking and walking, and she didn't even budge, not an inch. And then, when it was too late, I shouted, yes, yes, I must have shouted. I shouted, didn't I? I shouted! And all, but I cannot recall the exact words, and I'm sure that I was shouting while all of it, the evening sun and the road and the girl and the tray and the glasswork and the truck and my thoughts and my shouting and everything got involved with particles, marticles, sarticles, darticles. When Goddess Dawn has risen up for glory, as it says in Rig Veda. In her blanket splendor, like the waves of waters, she renders the pathway all easy and fair to travel, revealing herself to be benign and friendly. And we see that she is good, and her luster is shining, and her splendors connect the road that we must take straight to the heavens. Dawn, thou makest bare thy bosom, and showest us thy way. Her name was Kusum, a flower. She was not even 8 years old, and with the sand and the dust settling, and the evening sky turning orange and red, we found ourselves sitting together there on the tarmac, still warm of the day and simmering, but now carpeted with fragrant flower buds of her blood. And the tray lay bent midway, and the glass that had been on it was in pieces, sharp and mingled and violently out of place, but surprisingly peaceful in that late ray of sunlight, with edges red and greasy, and having done their life-threatening work. And she did not speak, she did not cry. She lied there and stared. I knew quite a bit of verses by heart back then, and I prayed again. Uttishta jagatra prapya varani bodhata kshurasya dara nishita duratyaya durgam patastat kavayo vadanti. Arise, awake, approach the great and learn. Like the sharp edge of a razor is the road, so the poets say. And indeed so hard to tread and difficult to cross. Arise, awake, and stop not till your goal is reached. And when I saw that her right ear was dangling down on her shoulder, and a small shard of bottle green glass was protruding from her skull just above that dark red well of life from which her Atman or Anatman or what do I know was flowing now rapidly down, and when I had finished thanking Dawn for having re-emerged upon it, in a flash I took off my satchel laden with books, and in order to get my backpack, and I remember that I had a bottle in there of Bisleri as yet unopened, unlike the conch shell of her ear, and I wanted to wash her, and there was some bandage with which I could try to keep her head from further emptying itself on the road. And on the tarmac, in the dust, fell everything from my satchel, a fresh copy of the Kathopanishad, from which I had just recited the verse, and Hans Wolfgang Schumann's In the Footsteps of the Historical Buddha, by that time in tatters, and the works of Dharmanand Kosambi, his essential writing, gracefully edited by his granddaughter, and of course, Shantideva's Bodhicharyavatara, and even 100 poems by Ahmed Faiz. And having books in the dust on the road is haram, I know, but with a mantra in my mind that to abstain from material possessions is key, I could not care less at this moment, and I was quite ready to leave behind all this printed matter and sacred texts and other writings, unread but not forgotten, and even the poems now stained with the dark red and the throbbing fluids of her Ganga. Could it be that in my bag was the essence of her life? I was in haste, and I did not even assign a fraction of expensive time to delve deep into my bag and to look for the bandage. So I took out a fresh kurta that I had just bought on the market in Muzaffarpur, and I tore it. And with my other hand, I took her ear and I flapped it upwards. into its place, and I held it in my thumb, and I pressed down onto her delicate skull, where the piece of glass had flown down by now, like a paper on a boat, like in that song, you know, Yedolat Bilelo, Kagash Kikashti, or had it disappeared into the abyss of her brains? How did I know? It was gone. And I wound my kurta around her head, and I wound it, and I wound it, and I wound it, and I pressed hard, and I hoped that the blood would stop flowing. And she did not say a word, and her name was Kusum, and she had been walking in front of me for really, really, really a long time, and I had slowly agreed to the pace that she had taken in front of me, and I had settled into the rhythm of her lotus feet, and I had seen that truck coming towards us first as the pinpoint head on a whirling funnel of sand and dust, and then and I had shouted, I had shouted, but way too late, and now she's sort of lying in my arms like a helpless little kitten, desperately looking for the essence of existence from her mommy's bosom. But I am not the goddess Dawn, and I can't give her life, and I was not sure that I could really help her or anything. So what to do? For a whole long time, she did not say a word as she lay in the swan's embrace of my arms, like wings, her eyes open, looking towards some ethereal place high up, something that I couldn't fathom. Her eyes, the only sign of her inner self, in that one and lonely tear that had left like a snaily trace on her dusty cheek, connecting the innermost core of her left eye with that one drop of salty substance that stood upright on her skin there, like a tiny devotional stupa. Her name was Kusum. And she did survive. And for some time, it was really hard for me, for the David Attenborough in me, to keep my mind from drifting away on the beauty of the night and the howling of the jackals and the chirping of the crickets, while I gently rocked her in the wings of my arms. Till it came to me that she had quite fallen asleep on my drone, and we had become one body with the clouds now, she and I, and everything around us, and I covered her even more with my dark green dushala, and we sat there on the roadside, and I tried not to shiver, because the night had become unexpectedly cold and damp. And normally I would have walked some more in order to get to the next village or so, and I would have tried to spend the night there, but now I did not know how to get up and going without brutally forcing this helpless and abandoned little man cub from her peaceful slumber in my arms. There then, we sort of gently sat there in the darkness, just the two of us, filling a void of absence, enveloped by a chrysalis of cricket buzz. There was no longer any traffic on the road. There were no passers-by. I saw no lights. I heard no voices. And she breathed slowly and deliberately. And so did I. And the broken glasswork was still on the road, untouched, unused, pathetic looking, like run-down sparrows with carmine linings on their broken wings, useless, hollowly deep. So we sat there, and she breathed for life with every inch of her body. She breathed for spirit. I think she breathed for Atman, her Atman, my Anatman, or whatever. What did I know? But she seemed to breathe for the both of us, and thus we spent the first vigil of the night. And of course, I would not sleep. It occurred to me that I should probably sing a life-giver song or plead for her life, like Savitri notoriously once did so well for her husband Satyavant, luring Yama, god of death, into the realms of her charms with poetry and loving kindness. But would my kirtan and my metta do if Yama came? I doubt it. Would I be good enough and strong enough? Most surely I would not. And then for a second, I thought of the village, as yet unseen and undiscovered, that swan's nest that was bound to lay across somewhere in the barren mustard fields, where pie dogs were heard howling in the darkness, and where shelter and care were sure to abound, and where the Kusum in my arms must certainly hail from. And would not her parents be restless that she hadn't come home? And would they not shroud her absence with sorrow and lament? And would her folk not mind a lot? And I felt apprehensive and overcome with doubt. What was it that I had left undone which could have moved the state we were in towards a better outcome? And thus passed the first vigil, and with the coming of the second vigil, I got overpowered by an all-pervading urge to act, and I decided to wake her and speak to her urgently, and questioning me, and admonishing me severely, yet lovingly, as a father would do for a long-lost child. The stridulation of her dreams interrupted. She looked at me, and the milky ocean in her eyes seemed smaller than I remembered. And although she did seem to hear and understand my questions and my worries and my doubts and my fears, and she chose to not say a word. And I decided to call her Kusum, which means flower. And she kept staring at the broken glasswork on the road ahead, and then it came to me, and I understood, and I read it in her every pore, that even with her head bandaged in the best of my kurtas, and her ear dug somewhere deep inside the womb under the makeshift turban that I had draped her head with, she could not go home, not possibly, because she had broken the glass. She would be held responsible for the damage. Her folk would be furious. So we kept seated in the night, in the cold, on the road, she and I. Once upon a time, in a piece of secret teaching known as the Kathopanishad, when Nachiketas had noticed that his father had been selecting a bunch of second-rate goods to offer to the gods, he resolved to do better than that. And he went to his daddy, Nachiketa, and he said, I am one of your most prized possessions, am I not? I am responsible, and I wonder to whom among the gods will you be offering me? Well, it should not surprise you that Nachiketa's old man was not too fond of the way in which he was being criticized by his boy for being frugal in his dealings with the gods. So, a bit angry, the father said, You, Nachiketa, well, I shall give you to Yama, the Lord of Death. Thus it happened that Nachiketa arrived at the doorstep of Death's office building in town. But since Death had just gone out for a short break away from the office, Nachiketa had to wait for no less than 3 days and nights before finally he was being passed through security and giving a visitor's badge by one of his lordship's uncanny yet able attendants. And then he came to the office itself, and as it turned out, he met Lord Yama. And Lord Yama seemed to be in no mood for insults or broken promises. And he kindly spoke to Nachiketa, and he said, Well, boy, since you have been waiting for 3 nights, now you may ask me for 3 moons. Well, this was fine for Nachiketa, so he proceeded forthwith, and as a first boon he asked, well, limitless amount of peace of mind and 3 times Shanti, Shanti, Shanti for both his father and himself, which was granted. Easy enough. Next, Nachiketa wished to learn how to set up a user account for an augmented reality game called Fire Sacrifice, which is an altogether serious business and some kind of hanky-panky that is normally reserved for only the highest ranking of divinely admitted cronies. And although Yama was understandably less keen this time, he had no other choice than to comply with this too. And for his last and third boon, brave Nachiketa asked fearsome Yama to be taught the enduring mystery of what comes after death. A congenital question, frankly, which was met with astonishment and bewilderment and sheer unbelief by Yama, since not even the Lord of Death seems to be able to fully grasp what comes after death, let alone to be given explanations thereof. But Nachiketa, urged by Yama to ask for anything else, such as wealth or fortune, or an almirah full of silk saris for his mother if she wanted. Nachiketa got a wee bit annoyed by Yama's refusal to comply to this third boon, and not taking 42 for an answer, our hero could not but remind the Lord of his hitherto unanimously praised and pukka reputation in steadfastness and honesty and sticking to one's word. Whereupon Yama, with an air composed and unflustered, secretly pleased with the apparent stubbornness and unrelenting inquisitiveness of his disciple, at last started elaborating on the intrinsic nature of the true self, the Atman. Yes, the soul, and not the not-soul. The human soul itself, which is believed, said Yama, to exist and persist even at yonder side, and which should be realized by the devotee to be inseparable from, no, identical with the Brahman, the supreme divine spirit, the vital force in the existence of the universe. You see, thought Yama, that art thou, Tat-Amasi, and thy purpose, the goal of the wise, is to fully realize this all-encompassing soul. This was, well, whoa. I mean, this was a very whoa, an absolutely dumbfounding piece of knowledge to be receiving from a godhead, which is why it took Nachiketa more than a few minutes to digest and get himself together. But in the end, he started grasping the idea and see the light, and thus having learned the wisdom of Atman and Brahman from Yama, the Lord of Death, Nachiketa was freed from the cycle of birth. Her name was Kusum. She was only 7 years old. She had been walking in front of me, and I had slowly fallen into her pace and into the rhythm of her footsteps. And although I had seen the truck coming towards us, first the pinpoint head on a whirling funnel of sand and dust, but later swelling and swelling and swelling and rolling by like the ire of Indra, I had not shouted. I had not warned her off, but instead Quite a bit later, I had found myself sitting on the tarmac throughout the first two vigils of a seemingly random night, sad yet blessed, with a flower in the wings of my arms, listening to the poets, studying biology, staring at some broken glass, and talking to Yama, the Lord of Death. And she survived.